As you know, just before Moses was born, the current king of Egypt at that time, the Pharaoh, was beginning to see that the Hebrews were growing in mass. I mean, their numbers were massive. And he became afraid. Fear took hold of him, and he was beginning to think that, well, maybe they might take things over. I'm going to have to do something about this. We need to get rid of those Hebrews. We need to stop their population growth. And the best way to stop their population growth is to get rid of those newborn baby boys. Well, anyways, he went ahead on and made a decree that the baby boys born to the Hebrews would be cast into the water. Well, that worked to some degree, except for in the case of Moses. His mother kept him hidden for 3 months. And when she could no longer hide him, she wrapped him up. She carved out a wooden ark, okay, just a little wooden boat. She carved it out. She put Moses in it. And she waited until she knew that Pharaoh's daughter was out by the water, and she sent the boat into the water, and the boat with the baby made it to Pharaoh's daughter's handmaidens. It worked on Pharaoh's daughter. She just loved the baby and wanted to keep him as her own. Of course, considering she hadn't given birth to the baby, she couldn't nurse the baby or anything, so she had her handmaidens find a nurse for the baby, and of course, who did they find but the baby's own mother? Now, metaphysically, here's where it gets deep. Moses means drawing out, exacting of water. And the birth of Moses represents man's development in consciousness of the law of being from the negative side. Now, I want you to hear me now on that. It means drawing out. So what are we talking about drawing out? We were drawing out the Hebrews from the bondage of the Egyptians. When they drew Moses out of the water, they drew the Hebrews out of slavery. Drawing out. Moses means drawing out of negativity. Water represents universal negation. Water also represents great possibility. And Moses was that great possibility. Moses was that great hope for the Hebrew nation. Moses was their salvation. Moses was the one that was going to lead them out. And he led them out by coming out of the water. So, out of seemingly negative conditions comes new growth. Out of seemingly negative conditions of slavery comes a new growth in the baby that will grow up to lead them out. So when we are in what seems like Egyptian darkness and we're weak as water, we are ripe for the higher understanding. We are ripe to be drawn out. The thoughts that rule in darkness are bent upon putting all the children of light out. Those negative thoughts try to rule over the positive thoughts. Those negative thoughts try to stamp out the light. Those negative thoughts try to take over, but you can't let them. You got to negate them. You got to draw out. All you got to have is a little faith. As Moses' parents were of the house of faith, then our desire to bring forth higher consciousness will find a protector. And Moses' protector was right there in the heart of the Egyptians. Moses was truly protected. You couldn't get any better than that, other than if the Pharaoh had actually pulled him out himself. So what we find is that involution brings evolution. Involution precedes evolution. So we must care for that infant thought, that small thought when it comes to us. We got to care for it. We've got to feed it. We've got to bring it up. We've got to grow it. That thought of truth is surrounded with love and trust. And that was his mother. His mother surrounded him with love and trust. Even though she put him in the hands of the Egyptians, she surrounded him with love and trust. And we've got to surround that little thought, that little spark of light when it first comes into our heart and our minds. We've got to surround it with love and trust. We've got to surround it and believe that it comes from the divine. And that's what Moses represents there. When we have arrived at a degree of understanding of truth, and that's like when Moses grew up. So when we grow up in the thought, when the thought starts to grow and take really good roots in us, then we're zealous in our principles. And we start to destroy anything that interferes with that principle and that thought flourishing and taking over. And this is going to lead to some contention. So now if you follow the story, you know that when Moses got a little bit older, he was a little bit conflicted because he then knew that he was not an Egyptian. He was a Hebrew in Egyptian clothes. And now don't you think for 1 minute that there wasn't somebody there to remind him of that. How many times have you been making your way up? How many times have you been celebrating something good in your life and there's somebody there to remind you, well, you used to be this. Well, you used to be that. There's always somebody there to throw back at you those doubts and fears that you had when you were trying to nourish that thought and bring it up. And that's what was going on with Moses. Moses was having this great conflict inside, this great argument of who am I? So Moses was looking out the window this one day. He saw a fight between an Egyptian and a Hebrew. What was inside was now reflected outside. Moses saw that internal fight that he was having right there before him. He had to make a choice. He had to do something. He was called into action. Moses ran out there, and of course, he chose the side of his own people. He chose the Hebrew people. He killed the Egyptian slave taskmaster, and he buried him in the sand. And he tried to go back to where he was. But you know, once you make a choice, you can't go back. Once you have stepped out into your destiny, you can't go back into the shadows. He chose that light of truth of who he really is above that false bravado. So had it not been for the adversity of his birth, he would not have had that opportunity. So when you look at your adversities, know that every adversity comes to bring you higher. Everything that happens to you is for your good. Even though it may not seem like it right now today, even though it may not feel like it right now today, that adversity is there to bring you to an opportunity. Now, he wasn't just educated as an Egyptian, he was educated as a ruler of people. Get that. You know you can be blessed and confused at the same time. Y'all know that? You can have your blessing but still be confused about what it is, what you're supposed to do with it. You can have your blessing and just look at it and not know what is this that I've got right here in front of me. What am I supposed to do with this? I don't know how many times we said, well, what am I supposed to do with this? Here, Moses had this education as a ruler. Moses had this blessing of this wonderful life, and he had chosen to go another way. So what am I supposed to do with this? What he's seeing as the ruler is being reflected from the inside, because now he's seeing two Hebrews fight. And he wants to go out there and try to bring some harmony and peace among the Hebrews. Because he now sees himself, he sees the truth, that spark of divinity in him, that light is starting to grow, and he knows who he is. He sees that truth. And when he sees it, he tries to go and be it. But you know what they said to him? Who made you Prince of the Hebrews? They just didn't know that they were seeing it before it was done. They didn't know that it was on the inside, involution was happening, and they were speaking of the evolution that was coming to be. Moses had to come to terms with that. You can't express something that you are not. You are going to reflect on the outside what you are on the inside. And that's what Moses was doing. He was reflecting on the outside what he already knew was true on the inside. He knew who he was. Do you know who you are? So now Moses is acting like a ruler. Moses is acting like what he knows he already is. But that's just the way things are. Because you're educated before you get the degree, right? I mean, you go through college, you have all the education before you get a diploma, right? You start preaching before you're ordained, isn't that right? It comes from the inside and it's reflected out. It's always in here first before it comes out. But you have to go through a period of transition where you have the vision to function on a level, but yet don't have the opportunity. You've got to see yourself doing it inside before it comes into manifest as the outside. You got to have the involution. before you have the evolution. You've got to elevate your thoughts. You've got to love them. You've got to trust them. You've got to care for them. You've got to have faith for them. Moses is at a point that he doesn't really fit in anywhere. God has shown him this truth of light of who he is. His life just wasn't matching that truth that was in him anymore. And sometimes your mind is in one place, but your situation has not caught up to it yet. Sometimes your thinking and feeling nature is over here, but your physical existence is over here. They haven't caught up yet. You're trying to do the things that you know you need to do because it hasn't manifested yet in the physical, but you're already doing it. But you know what happens? That's when people don't want your help. That's when the people that you're trying to help are the most difficult people that you encounter because they don't recognize what you recognize for yourself. But that's all right. That's all right. God's got it. Those words that you speak, those actions that you take, everything you do is a part of their involution. See, they got to get it too. They got to get their involution before they get their evolution, and you're just a part of that. You're just the one that's bringing that out. So that was Moses. He had put a dead man in the sand, and he was out there trying to stop a fight, and that started even more problems. Moses had tried to bury his past into the matters of material things. He was anointed into being the Hebrew leader, but yet he had not been yet appointed. God hadn't spoken to him yet in the burning bush. He hadn't had to take his shoes off. He hadn't had to take off his understanding to hear that wisdom of the Lord. He hadn't gotten all that yet. So what do you do when you have so much strength that people are coming to you now? They're coming to you and they're weighing it all on you. And when you get to that point, when your involution is starting to become your evolution, you feel the weight of what you need to do. And you got to be strong. This is where you got to be strong, because this is the time when all those little doubts and fears try to come up at you and get you. This is the time when all that has gone before tries to come up and overcome you. Fear will always come when you're about to break through. That's why they say the darkest hours before the dawn. And when you are about to evolve into your beingness, when you are about to evolve into who you are and what you are meant to be, when you are about to evolve into your appointed position, fear will take you over. But the thing you need to remember, the thing you need to hold on to, the thing you need to grasp is that once God calls you, he doesn't take it back. Once God has given it to you, it's yours. Only you can stick your head in the sand. Once God has called you from anointed to appointed, live your life. Live that appointment. Be who you know you are to be. InSpirit family, I want you to step out into your truth. I want you to live the life that God has shown you in your heart and your minds. InSpirit family, I want you to do you. Thank you.